Wrapping up Take Command. All right, Logan, you are at the Senior Bowl. Obviously, we're going to have our eye on quarterbacks this week. Bo Nix Michael Penix are down there. We're going to be doing a lot more stuff on the quarterbacks moving forward. So let's put them to the side for the moment. When you look at some of the other big positions of need, and I'll say like offensive tackle, edge, tight end, linebacker, any of those position groups particularly intrigue you this week as you get set to go to your first practice down in Mobile?
I mean, they all intrigue me because they're all need positions, right? But they intrigue me in different ways. So, for example, with the O-line, I mean, it's incredibly deep this year. And I think we talked about this on the last podcast. There's probably going to be 7 to 8 offensive tackles, offensive linemen drafted in the first round. And it's fun because a couple of those guys are here. So Talisi Fuaga's here, the guy from Oregon State. Measured in yesterday, 33-inch arms, a little shorter. So, some people say he might be a guard. And this is a good opportunity to kind of see, hey, am I a guard? Am I a tackle? I think you can do both. Troy Fontenot from Washington, from UW, will be here. He's one of the best kind of guard tackles in the class, played left tackle at UW. Is he converting inside? Tyler Guyton, Jordan Morgan, also like tremendous talents. Tyler Guyton, converted tight end. I mean, just is a tremendous athlete. And so, like, if by some miracle he slips to you in the second round, I think you're doing backflips if you're watching him. But all those guys, to me, feel like first-round players. Then you kind of get into that second tier of guy, and you get like the Kingsley Sumatayas, right, from BYU, who's kind of a more developmental guy, bigger body, kind of that athletic frame. But I guess what I'm trying to point out here is there are a lot of good football players at the tackle positions. Brendan Coleman from Texas. No, Christian Jones from Texas. Brendan Coleman from TCU. So there's like, I don't want to say you can throw a rock, because like you said, it's a little bit more top heavy because like they value that position. It's going to move up. But I think there's going to be guys there in the second round, if you value them appropriately, that can make that pick. And I think that's why it's exciting for me to be here this week, because there's a lot of guys that meet this criteria. There's a lot of guys that I have a draftable grade on. There's a lot of guys that have a starter grade on. And it's just about seeing how they perform in this setting.
So let me ask you this on behalf of the audience, because I think the term position flex got a poison forever here in DC over the last 4 years. When you say like, is he a guard? Is he a tackle? What is the line of delineation there? What makes someone guard material versus someone who can play outside? Like, what are the traits? And then why does it work for some and not for others?
Well, I think Brendan Coleman's a really good example of this. He's the TCU tackle. He played tackle at TCU, but he's probably going to play guard here. And so what you're looking for is just kind of a different type of athleticism. So tackles tend to be like basketball players. They have this really nice hip flexibility. They can kind of glide out of their set. And if you think about it, they have more space to contend with. So you want to see kind of this really athletic flexibility and then strength and power. And guards can be a little bit more rigid, right? They're kind of and that's what Brendan Coleman brings, right? He's like this rigid, tight-backed, tight-hipped, but he gets his hands on you, he can move you out of the spot, right? And I think like that's a really good juxtaposition. Like, yeah, Brendan Coleman can play tackle, but why do I want to put that guy out there? I want a Tyler Guyton to play tackle, right? I want Talisi Fuaga, right? He's a very good athlete in terms of how he moves. The arm length might be an issue, but we'll see. That's what this week's for, right? But I want that more athletic kind of basketball type out there because, again, they're not dealing with the same body types. And I think that's one of the reasons kind of diverging here is why you see like Chris Jones or Daron Payne when they move to the edge, they give tackles a hard time because they're not used to dealing with those big body types, while guards, on the other hand, tend to be very comfortable. Like, oh, I got this on lock. I'm ready to rock and roll. So that's kind of the difference. And I do think like I know position flex was poison, but there is value there, right? I want a guy that can play multiple positions because some teams only carry 7 on game day. So like we got to be able to make sure we move people around and give us an opportunity to get the best 5 on the field. So that's why a guy like Troy Fontenot from UW, who again played left tackle, I don't think he's a left tackle in the NFL, but let's say you have an injury and you say, man, this guy can play left or right tackle if we need to, and we can bring that swing guard in. Because I personally think it's easier to find a guard than it is to find a tackle. So when there's an opportunity to have a guy who's got tackle ability, like I think you got to jump on that, kind of like Sam Cosmi. And again, that's one of the reasons why these positions on the offensive line are so valuable, in my opinion. Because let's say you draft a Sam Cosmi in the second round, it doesn't work out at tackle. He's a fine tackle, but he's a really good guard. You don't miss on the pick in the same way.
Right. I do think something that maybe they took that too far on the O-line is like,
yeah,
you need to get like if you're doing that and with the intention of that guy playing guard, but in a pinch he can play tackle, that's one thing. If you do it the other way, that's where you get in trouble. Where if you're like, we're drafting this guy to play tackle. Oh crap, he's a guard. Well, now you're without a tackle. And I think that is where they got themselves in trouble these last couple of years, and where a guy like, Braden Daniels, where everyone's like, hey dude, guard, and then they draft and play tackle and it didn't look very good in camp. That's going to wind up being a miss if they keep trying to tackle. Obviously, we'll see what the new regime does. As he missed his entire rookie season on IR. Tight end is another position that definitely I think we see the value. Something we didn't really talk about. I guess you touched on it briefly, but something that's worth underlining about championship weekend is all 4 teams had stud tight ends. And some teams had 2, like, the Ravens have Likely and Mark Andrews. The Chiefs obviously have Kelsey. 49ers with Kittle and Laporta with the Lions. It is such a valuable position. What does this class look like? And what is the likelihood that, the Commanders can get a really good one with one of those 5 top 100 picks?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's Brock Bowers, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick, top 5 pick, depending on maybe top 15. Like he's maybe the second best pass catcher in the draft. So it just depends on how you want to allocate that resource in terms of value. Jadavion Sanders is a guy that I think is really interesting, a little stiff for me, but he's kind of the second guy. And I do think there is, there's guys here at the Senior Bowl that I'm excited to watch, right? There's Jared Wiley from TCU, a guy that blocked like a tackle in 2022 and caught passes like a receiver in 2023. Can those guys be the same player this year? And you got to kind of figure out what's going on there. But after that, you get kind of in this land of misfit toys, right? There's Jaheim Bell, who measured in at 6'1" and 244, so built like a running back, runs like a wide receiver. My comp for him was Deebo Samuels, just to give you an idea of like how he fits in an offense. So can he play real tight end for you? Probably not, but maybe like a move F piece. There's Ben Sinnott, who is a kind of a fullback. He reminds me a lot of Kyle Juszczyk when I watch him. So again, there's not like this like archetype for the position. There's Theo Johnson for Penn State, a big kind of Gronkowski type guy, but doesn't run that well. You know what I'm saying? There's all these guys that have these warts. So to me, outside of the top 3, I don't feel like there's a strong kind of game-changing type player. Tanner McLaughlin from Arizona is interesting, converted wide receiver, moving to the position, runs like a receiver, but doesn't really block very well, doesn't have that dynamic athleticism. So I think an interesting person in this conversation is Johnny Wilson from Florida State.
I was just about to ask about him because he was a stud receiver at Florida State, but he gets down there to Mobile and he weighs in at 237. And people are immediately going, tight end?
And he played at 237, but he's just so damn big. He's 6'6". His arms were 35 inches long, which is crazy. He had the longest wingspan of any non-offensive lineman at the combine. I think only 2 guys had longer wingspans. One was Patrick Paul, who's 6'7". The other one is Miles Cole, the defensive end from Texas Tech. And he's like 6'5". He also has the longest arms like ever measured. They were like 36 inches and a quarter at the measurement yesterday. So crazy. So like, I personally think he's a receiver. Like he just moves like a receiver. His route running nuance is so high. But can you kind of maybe bastardize his role and be like, hey, we're not going to ask you to block in line, but we'll have you do some like kind of move, maybe some cut blocking, some stuff like that. Because again, he doesn't have like the physicality. Like he's big, obviously. He's long and he looks like more like a basketball player, but he doesn't have like that muscular development to be like, you could be a tight end right away. Maybe if you gain 15 pounds to be that guy, but he's really interesting as kind of that big F, big Z potentially. We'll see. Then again, it's a big week for him. If he wants to play receiver, this is a great week to say, hey man, I'm Mike Evans. I'm not Jimmy Graham, and so that's kind of something you're watching because again, like he's a guy that has a very unique skill set, catches the ball well. He had a couple drops this year, which were frustrating, but runs excellent routes. One of the better route runners in the class. It's just he's big as hell. So like, where do you put him?
Right.
And again, very interesting talent.
All right. Last question for you. And this is harder at the beginning of the week than it will be at the end. But who is like your 1, 2, or 3 candidates for the all Logan Paulsen team by the end of the week? Like who's like last year? We came out and it was like Cody Mock. Love that dude. He just mauls people. Think he's missing some teeth. Like we love Cody Mock. Is there anybody going into the week where you're like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to come out loving this dude. Obviously, you'll get the actual Logan Paulsen team when you watch practice. But who's the early candidate?
That's a great question. So obviously, Talisi Fuaga, like the way he plays on film, he is just a animal. And I like animals. And so it's easy to say him because he's like the first tackle on my board.
Right.
I put him in my top 10 on my mock draft, which is going to be on Command Center this week. So obviously I really like him a lot, but there's a reason I like him a lot. It's because he plays the game with a violent edge. Also there's, what's his name? Simone Vahi for Utah, who's a really interesting player. And again, like I can't wait to watch this guy play. He played safety. He reminds me of like Eric Weddle, not a great tackler, but then he played 3 games at running back this year and looked like Christian McCaffrey. And that's not an exaggeration. So I want to see him. I don't care if he's excellent. He's very fast and explosive, great ball skills, great in coverage, not a great tackler. But watching him run the football, I was like, I want to see him with the ball in his hands more. So is this a week where you kind of say, hey, man, this guy's a dynamic player at the running back position? I don't know, but I want to see him. Johnny Wilson's a guy. Again, I've got him circled in red pen. There's a lot of receivers here that I think are going to be really dynamic football. We talked about this ad nauseum, but those are some guys that I've kind of got circled. Like, what are you going to be? How physical are you? Really? And again, another guy I want to point out, Patrick Paul, just because the measurements came out yesterday, 6'7", 330, 36-inch arms. Like, I don't know if he's the best football player. I don't have him graded that highly, but he's a big son of a gun, and it's always fun to see how those guys play on the first day. So
yeah, for sure. I'm very excited for the all Logan Paulsen team. We'll do that probably early next week. We anticipate our next podcast being about the next Commanders head coach. Whether that happens, we're recording this Tuesday morning. It could happen as soon as today. They're doing the interviews first, I think, in Ashburn today. Then they fly to Detroit to do the interviews with Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. Those could spill into tomorrow, but I would imagine by Thursday at the absolute latest we have a coach. But I would say this. Our next podcast will be later this week, and it will be about the new head coach, barring something very bizarre happening. Exactly what day that pod will be is kind of a TBD depending on that news. But that's why you subscribe. Whenever it happens, we will have it for you. And of course, if it does happen sooner than Thursday or Friday when we are scheduled to record again, we'll try to get you some instant reaction from the Hoffman Show that we will stick in the Take Command feed. Often Logan will call in and we'll have him on the radio show. And so we get you the same insight and analysis in that forum. So subscribe to the Take Command podcast wherever you are listening right now, and we will see you later in the week here on Take Command.